What kind of hatred grows so deep that it seeks not just to exclude but to erase? How does an entire society come to accept the unthinkable, to watch, to participate, or to stay silent as millions are marked for death? And perhaps the most disturbing question of all, could something like this ever happen again? This is not just a story about one man. It is a story about fear, power, and the slow corrosion of humanity. If you're new here on History Moments, consider subscribing, because some stories are too important to forget. And as you listen, ask yourself, what would you have done? There are moments in history that feel distant, almost unreal, like shadows that belong to another world. But the story of the Holocaust is not one of those moments. It is painfully real. It happened within living memory. It unfolded not in secrecy, but in full view of society. At the center of it all was Adolf Hitler, a man whose name has become synonymous with hatred and destruction. But focusing only on him creates a dangerous illusion that this horror began and ended with a single individual. Because it didn't. The targeting of Jewish people did not appear overnight. It was not born in a single speech or a single law. It was built piece by piece over time. Before we go further, pause for a moment. Why do you think societies turn against certain groups? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you haven't already, subscribe, because understanding history is one of the only ways to protect the future. To understand how this tragedy began, we must go back centuries before Hitler was even born. Anti-Jewish prejudice, known as anti-Semitism, had existed in Europe for generations. It was rooted in religion, myths, and long-standing stereotypes. Jews were often portrayed as outsiders, different, untrustworthy, dangerous. In medieval times, they were blamed for plagues, accused of poisoning wells, forced into segregated communities, denied rights that others took for granted. And over time, these ideas hardened. They became part of cultural memory, passed from one generation to the next, rarely questioned, often reinforced. So when people later heard claims about Jews being a threat, those claims did not sound new. They sounded familiar. What happens when lies are repeated for centuries? When prejudice becomes tradition? Let me know what you think in the comments. And stay with History Moments for more stories that challenge what we think we know. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Europe was changing rapidly. Industrialization was reshaping economies. Cities were growing. Old systems were collapsing. And with change came fear. People looked for someone to blame, someone to hold responsible for uncertainty, for loss, for instability. At the same time, new ideas about race began to spread. Pseudoscientific theories claimed that humanity could be divided into superior and inferior groups. These ideas were not fringe. They were discussed in universities, written in books, and accepted by many. Jews, once targeted mainly for religious reasons, were now being labeled as a racial threat. Not just different, but dangerous by nature. Can you see how this shift changes everything? When hatred becomes scientific, it feels justified. Comment your thoughts, and subscribe to History Moments if you want to keep exploring the deeper forces behind history's darkest moments. Then came World War I. Germany, once a powerful empire, was left devastated. Its economy collapsed, its people suffered, and its pride was shattered. Many Germans felt humiliated, betrayed, desperate. And in that desperation, a dangerous narrative began to take hold. The idea that Germany had not truly lost the war on the battlefield, but had been stabbed in the back by enemies within. Among those blamed were Jews. It didn't matter that countless Jewish soldiers had fought for Germany. Facts were no longer important. Emotion had taken over. Fear, anger, resentment. These emotions needed a target. Have you ever seen how quickly people look for someone to blame during a crisis? Share your perspective in the comments. And if you're finding this story powerful, subscribe to History Moments, because we're only just beginning. Into this chaos stepped Hitler. He was not a powerful man at first, not wealthy, not respected, but he understood something deeply unsettling about human nature. He understood that fear could be weaponized, that people could be united not just by hope, but by hatred. In his speeches, he painted a picture of a Germany that had been betrayed, a nation weakened by internal enemies. And again, he pointed to Jews as the cause. It was simple, it was emotional, and it was effective, because it gave people something they desperately wanted, a clear enemy. But ask yourself, why do simple answers become so powerful in complex times? Comment your thoughts below, and stay with History Moments for more insights into how history unfolds. As Hitler gained influence, his ideas began to spread, not just among extremists but among ordinary citizens. This is where the story becomes truly unsettling, because it was not just about one man's hatred anymore. It was about a society slowly accepting that hatred. Through propaganda, the Nazi regime controlled information. Newspapers, films, posters, all carried the same message. Jews were portrayed as parasites, as threats, as less than human. Children were taught these ideas in school. Neighbors began to see each other differently. The shift was gradual, almost invisible at first, but it was happening. What would it take for an entire society to change the way it sees a group of people? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to History Moments, because these questions still matter today. Then came the laws. In 1935, the Nuremberg laws stripped Jews of their rights as citizens. They could no longer marry non-Jews. They were excluded from professions, isolated, marked. This was no longer just rhetoric. It was policy. And once discrimination becomes law, it gains a terrifying legitimacy. People begin to think, if it's legal, it must be right. But was it? Or was it the beginning of something far darker? Pause and reflect. Would you have spoken out or stayed silent? Share your thoughts in the comments. And stay with History Moments as we continue this journey into one of history's darkest chapters. The violence escalated. In 1938, during an event known as Kristallnacht, Jewish homes, businesses, and synagogues were destroyed across Germany. Thousands were arrested. Many were killed. And the world watched. Some protested. Many did not. Because by now, the groundwork had been laid. Jews had been dehumanized, seen not as neighbors but as problems. And when people are seen as problems, solutions become dangerous. What do you think allows people to justify violence against others? Comment below. And if this story is opening your eyes, subscribe to History Moments, because the lessons here are too important to ignore. Then came the war. World War II created the conditions for something even more horrific. Under the cover of conflict, Nazi policies became more extreme. Jews were forced into ghettos, starved, isolated. Then came deportations. Trains carrying men, women, and children to places they did not understand. Destinations they could not imagine. And at the center of it all was a chilling idea. The final solution. The systematic attempt to eliminate an entire people. How does a society cross that line? From discrimination to destruction? Take a moment and share your thoughts. And stay with History Moments, because we are approaching the darkest point of this story. The climax of this tragedy unfolded in concentration and extermination camps. Places like Auschwitz became symbols of industrialized death. People were stripped of their identities, their dignity, their humanity. Families were separated. Lives were reduced to numbers, and millions were murdered, not in chaos but with terrifying organization. This was not random violence. It was planned, executed, sustained, and perhaps the most haunting question remains, how did so many people become part of it? Reflect on that question. Comment your thoughts below. And if you believe stories like this must be remembered, subscribe to History Moments. When the war ended, the world began to uncover the full extent of what had happened. The images, the testimonies, the unimaginable scale of loss. 6 million Jews murdered, countless others persecuted. Survivors were left to rebuild their lives, carrying memories that no one should have to bear. The world said, never again. But what does that truly mean? Does remembering prevent repetition? Or does it require something more? Share your thoughts in the comments, and stay connected with History Moments, because history only matters if we learn from it. So why were Jews targeted? The answer is not simple. It was centuries of prejudice, economic fear, political manipulation, pseudoscience, propaganda, silence. It was the failure of individuals and the failure of systems. It was what happens when hatred is allowed to grow unchecked. And when people stop seeing others as human. Could it happen again? That question lingers, because the warning signs, fear, division, dehumanization, are not confined to the past. They are patterns, and patterns can repeat. History does not just tell us what happened. It asks us who we are. Will we question what we are told? Will we challenge injustice? Will we see humanity, even when others do not? Or will we look away? That choice is always ours. If the story moved you, share your thoughts below. And subscribe to History Moments, because the past is not just something we remember. It's something we must understand. And never, ever forget.